Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about the Foundation Directory Online. I am Jenna-Lee Kibert. I'm the Digital Services Librarian for the Meridian Library District. And we'll also be joined by Erin Turner, who is the Foundation Manager for the Meridian Library Foundation. So I'm going to give an overview of accessing the Foundation Directory Online professional version, and Erin will go over accessing the FDO from home with the Essentials version. So we'll go over what the Foundation Directory Online is, and I may sometimes use the acronym FDO throughout the presentation. And we will talk about how to access the database, some strategies for successful research, an overview of some specific search strategies, and then where to look for some more resources on your own. So the FDO is a searchable database for grant information. The grant makers in the database are all US based. Some of the projects may take place outside of the states, but the funders are all US based. It will show us who has funded or received what kinds of projects, for how much, and when the grants were awarded. And this information comes from a variety of data sources. It comes directly from participating funders who provide information to the FDO. It comes from IRS information. It comes from usaspending.gov, and that is specifically for federal grants. Information is also pulled from funder websites, news and press releases, and additional reporting sites and partnerships. So the FDO employs many researchers, and they are constantly adding to this database. So if it's been a while since you've looked at it, it's worth popping in, even annually as those IRS information is updated to see what might be new and what might have changed for different funders. Our subscription allows the library to provide access on site only at one location. So for the most part, you will access the FDO at Cherry Lane, and you can do so whether you're on your own laptop on location or one of our computer stations. You can also give us a call if you would like to reserve a study room for a longer search session. And the best way to jump in is to go to our website. Across the top menu, you'll see a research tab, and under that you can go to our research tools page. From there, you can filter the results at the left, or you can just scroll down to Foundation Directory. Our tools are all listed in alphabetical order. So on site at Cherry, you'll just click on that logo for Foundation Directory, and it will take you right into the database. You don't need to enter your card number or anything. From home, you can register for a 24-hour day pass to access Essentials, and that is one pass per month per patron. So it's a limited access from home, but Erin will give us some tips later on how to make the best use of that time. So before we even dive into our research, it's really helpful to think and take some notes about our project so we've got a good frame of mind and can use our time well when we're in the database. So think about what our project specifically is, who is our intended audience, what we think the impact will be, if there's a specific geographic area or demographic, like a specific age group, or whether it's children or seniors, where the project will take place, what type of project it is, and then what the total cost is. A lot of grants do require a match, so knowing how much our organization can afford will be a good starting point, because essentially, a lot of grants would then double that if it's a one-to-one match, and different grants allow different kinds of match. So it'll be important to take all of that into account as we go out and seek our funding. For the search session itself, it's helpful to kind of have an idea in mind about what you want to learn and what the intended outcome is. So for one search session, it might just be to find one grant that looks like it might be a potential match for our project, or one grant maker that looks like they have funded projects like ours. Or it might just be to get a sense of the foundation directory database itself and play around and just learn more about how to even do the research in there so that you can come back to it next time with a little more guidance. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump into a search. And our example today is a community garden. So we are going to pretend that the library at Cherry Lane location is going to build a community garden. We're going to focus mostly on STEM and science as part of our programming. We're hoping to incorporate some involvement from Meridian Middle School students. They're right across the street, and this is a great learning opportunity. It is, of course, here in Meridian, Idaho, and we're going to say this is a pretty big project. We'll say it's a $10,000 project in all, and that's going to cover infrastructure, probably some sprinkler systems, some soil, the building of the boxes. We're also going to purchase some collection items that will help with the learning about gardening and soil science and maybe some environmental impact. And then we'd also like to host some special programs throughout the year as we are getting this community garden up and running. So we may need some funding to pay for some outside speakers to come and present. So this is kind of a framework of our project and who it will be aimed for and what we hope the impact will be. So when you land in the database, it will take you to this initial search screen. And in this search box, it just allows for an open phrase search. So you can just put in a phrase that best fits your project. For this project, I simply put in the phrase community garden in Meridian, Idaho. From that search, it brought 107 grant makers, 356 grants, and 44 recipients that matched our search terms. And we can see at the top of the screen that from that phrase that I initially put in, it pulled out the standard subject terms that the database uses. So it is searching on gardening, community food systems, botanical gardens, and the state of Idaho. So we might look at that and say, some might be a better fit than others, and you can just hit the little X next to the term if it does not fit your project, or you can pop into the advanced search and you can add and subtract subject area terms, and you could change your geographic focus. You can also put in additional terms in the other fields like the population served and the support strategy, like what kind of funding is given or received. And you can also limit by grant amount or the year if you only want very recently funded results. So in our list, it gave us grant makers, grants, and recipients. So this is the top of the list for both our grant makers and the specific grants that were awarded. So we've got 107 grant makers and 356 grants we can take a look at. And as we look at the top of the list for grant makers, we can see it is sorted on the total grant count. So the number of grants awarded by this grant maker that matched our search terms. So we've got 47 that were awarded from the Idaho Community Foundation. So that seems promising. By clicking on the Idaho Community Foundation name, it will take us into their grant maker profile. And this is where we can learn more about this grant maker. At the top, it will give us some nice grant visuals, some charts and graphs that give us a quick overview of what is being funded, what kind of topics. So it looks like they fund a lot of science and education as well as human services are in their top 3. And then most of that funding is here in Idaho. And most of those grants are under $5,000. So when you're on site, you can click into these graphs and dive into that detail a little bit more. So we're going to look at the results by the grant amount. So we can see the highest was in 2018 for $7,500, and it drops pretty quickly to a $3,000 grant awarded in 2016. And again, it reminds us at the top that the most common grant amount is $1,000. So as we think about our project being a $10,000 project, we might think about what one component might we request from this organization that would be a good fit for their more common grant amount. But I see that they funded a library. So we're going to take a look at this Garden City Public Library Foundation and just see what kind of library projects they have funded in the past. So for this grant, which was awarded for $3,000, it paid for some collection development for the Garden City Public Library. It matches the subjects of academic libraries, gardening, and public libraries. They may have had a partnership with an academic library, or this project just happened to fit both of those subjects. But we can see that they supported collections acquisitions. Since our project involved some collection development to get some gardening books or take-home kits or something of that nature, we can see that this is seeming promising, right? They have funded a library and they have funded collections. We can take a look at a different grant now, and this is also from the Idaho Community Foundation. It was awarded to the Junior League, and in this case, it was to build 2 community gardens at local elementary schools. So again, we see our funder is awarding both the type of organization that we are and the type of projects that we have. So it looks like Idaho Community Foundation might be a good fit for us. Another way to take a look at this would be to go back to that grant maker profile. And at the very top, there's a newer feature where it provides you a link to assess this grant maker. When you click on that, it takes you into a kind of a funder wizard where it takes you step by step through a questionnaire, and it pulls out things from the grant maker profile, such as the subjects that they like to fund, their geographic focus, eligibility, even support strategy. So it takes you through and you can checkbox those which seem like they may be matching subjects to your project, and it gives you some good questions to evaluate whether or not this might be a good prospect for your project. So that's a helpful way to kind of quickly dive in and get a quick view of where you might find some matches with this grant maker. And then if you look more fully through their profile outside of that wizard, you can see that some grant maker profiles are more complete than others, and that just is depending on what information is available to the researchers at FDO. And then in addition to the grants awarded, the profile will give an overview of their funding interests, related organizations, financials, and their board of directors. So knowing who is involved in an organization can help you network and learn more about them before you apply. You'll find contact information, and often there will be information about how grant proposals are accepted. So it'll tell you, whether that's a form you fill out on their website or whether you send them a proposal by email. It will give you that information. You will not apply for the grants themselves through this database, through this portal. It just gives you all the contact information you need to learn more and find those grants. So it'll be important to also visit each grant maker's website or contact them to get the current information about the grant requirements and also the process. So going back to that initial search, we saw that in addition to the grant makers, it also gave us a list of specific grants and recipients. So this would be another way to kind of explore and see where we might find some other resources for funding. So under the grants, we had 356 different grants listed that matched our terms, and there were 44 recipients. So we can see who might have had a similar project and what kind of funding they received. So jumping into a grant example, this recipient was the Boys and Girls Club of Ada County, and that matched our subjects of gardening and youth services. This was a building and renovation project, and I believe it involved a community garden as well. In this case, the grant maker was the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation. So that may be a good hint to us that that might be another grant maker profile we might want to take a look at later. And then looking at another organization that provides education and kind of some science and gardening aspects, we can take a look at the profile for the recipient, and in this case, Boise Urban Garden School. And the charts are a little different for the recipients, but operate similarly. When we're using the professional, we can jump into these grants. They're interactive, so we can get some good lists from these. And this will show us what type of organizations are giving to this recipient. So kind of where their funding is coming from, whether it's community foundations, government organizations, or corporate funders. We can see where they're mostly based. So it looks like this is mostly local or same state funders. And then we can look at their grant sizes. So we can see the Boise Urban Garden School, most of the grants they're receiving are less than $5,000. So again, looking at our $10,000 project, we could see we might want to break that down into some smaller components if a common grant amount is awarded at less than $5,000. So that is an overview of accessing the professional foundation directory online and what you can see in some of the grant maker and recipient profiles. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Erin, and she is going to give you some practical applications for accessing the Essential, and that is our remote access, which we have been offered from home due to library closures.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jenna Lee. As you can see, the FDO professional that you can access at Cherry Lane is extremely robust. There's so much information that you can find on the directory, but right now it might not be feasible to go into the library for a number of different reasons. And so you want to be able to access it from home. The FDO Essential is a little bit more limited on what information is contained on it. So I want to be able to give you some practical applications to be able to use that Essentials from home. And then also some quick and easy strategies that you can use so you're not spending so much time looking for grant makers. So the objectives for this portion, we're going to review quickly the differences between FDO Essentials and that full on-site directory. We're going to learn how to access the day pass to Foundation Directory Online, the Essential version. We're going to identify best prospects for your grant requests and gain a few strategies on how to build your grant workbook using Guidestar. And I use this word grant workbook. We'll find a little bit more information about that towards the end. So what is the difference between professional and essential? Obviously, you saw previously that the professional version has so much information. You can see the number of profiles and recipient profiles is extreme. So there's a lot of them. And the essential version just doesn't have quite as many. However, it does allow you to remotely access the database, and it's a really quick and convenient way to start the process of looking for potential funders for your grant request. So how do we access it? Same as the full version. When you're on site, you're going to go to those research tools on mld.org, and you're going to click on the link that says register for a 24-hour day pass. And again, as Jenna Lee mentioned, you get one 24-hour day pass per month. So it's really important to utilize that time that you have and have all of these tips and tricks ready before you even log in. So once you get to the page, it is going to ask you for an email, and it will send you a link. That link is only going to be valid for 30 minutes, so make sure that this is the time to dedicate to searching the foundation directory online. And once you're in, that first time, they are going to ask a few questions. You won't need your patron number, and it isn't required that you have an EIN. So you'll be able to just log in with your email address, name, country, and then your field of interest. So now that you're in, this is a lot of great information that we're presenting to you here today, but a couple of quick tips. There will be pop-up tutorials along the way, so take advantage of those so you can figure out how to search better and learn all of the different tools that the directory has to offer. And the other thing to keep in mind is that a 24-hour day pass is going to go pretty quick. So in the upper left-hand corner, you will have that kind of marker counting down how much time you still have remaining. Same tips as when you're using the full directory. Know the information that you want to search before you go. Oftentimes, your nonprofit might have lots of different categories or grant proposals, but try and narrow it down to one specific focus. So for this particular example, our focus is going to be technology for Unbound. So our staff at Unbound has a wish list of items that they would love to have. There's 3D printers, podcasting equipment, and so much more. So our focus for this particular example is going to be technology capital for Unbound. That's in education and STEM with a focus on small businesses and entrepreneur. We're searching for grant makers that serve Ada County. And because our wish list item has all of the numbers for how much each item costs, I know that I need to be looking for grants that are somewhere between $3,000 and $20,000. So now that I have all of that information and I'm signed into the essentials, now I'm going to start searching. I want to cast my net pretty wide, so I'm just going to put in basic technology and see what pops up. Now, once I type in technology, I can see I cast it pretty wide. There's over 5,000 grant makers with technology grants. So that's a little bit too much for me to search through in one sitting. So in the upper right-hand corner, there are advanced search and filters. So I'm going to narrow it down a little bit further, and I'm going to use that geographic location. So I'm searching for grant funders that have technology grants that serve Ada County. And that drops it down to 17. So that seems like a much more manageable number of grant makers to do some research on. Now, as I click a little bit further, I can even toggle one more box that says exclude grant makers not currently accepting applications, and that brings it down to 11. Typically, when I am looking through Foundation Directory Essential, I dedicate about 30 to 45 minutes to just do some initial research and find some potential funders for my grant project. So 11 is a perfect amount to do some quick research on and see if they're a good prospect or not. So once you have this list, one quick tip that I have for you is to download a PDF version or email it to yourself using the tools in the upper right-hand corner. I like to email it to myself. So if I do nothing else besides narrow it down to these 11, I can do further research later on, even when I don't have access to the FDO. So I go ahead and I click on that email button. And because I might not be doing more research for another week or two, I do like to put in a little message to myself. Hey, this is for technology grant makers in Ada County. So that way, when I pull it up, I know exactly what this list is showing. So here is a sample of what that PDF looks like when it's emailed to me. I have all that same information that I did when I had access to the Foundation Directory online. So now that I've saved that preliminarily for myself, I'm going to do a little bit more digging on some of these to start to weed out who might be a good prospect and who might not be. So the biggest thing to consider when you're doing this and using that essential day pass, your biggest goal is to accumulate some information about good prospects for your grant workbook. Additional research can be done in a later time. And I think Jenna Lee said it before that this is a good starting point for finding potential grant makers. but you will be doing some additional research later on, and I will give you some tips about that as well. So the first one that we see at the top of our list is the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation. And if you just mouse over it, you are going to get a little bit of a snapshot about this particular grant maker. For example, the top subjects for this grant maker are education, human services, sports, and recreation. Once I click on it, I can see a little bit more information. Now, the big difference that you're going to see in Essential versus the Professional when you have full access to the database is you're not going to be able to click on all of these buttons and see all that really great information. You're going to see this sign here that says upgrade for more subject details. The only information that you're going to get is when you mouse over it, you're going to see how much was funded in each of those categories. For example, how much was funded over, was that 12 million, 12.5 million being funded. So you'll be able to see the numbers, but you won't be able to click on it to do some more digging. And where the money is going, again, you can mouse over it, see a little bit of information, a snapshot of the number of grants that were received in each state, but that's all. And then again, how big are the grants? You're going to get an idea of how big they are, but you're not going to know who the recipients were, what the projects were, anything like that. That's okay though. We can still see a lot of information from here. We know already that education is an important part of our technology grant. We know Idaho is an important part of our technology grant, and we know that the amount, the size of this grant is about in our range as well. So again, tip on this one, we already know kind of preliminarily that this is potentially a good prospect for us. And so we're going to use these tools at the top to email a PDF of that to yourself so you can do some more research on this later. So here is what that looks like. You're going to see all of that same information. You only have access to FDO for 24 hours, but we were able to capture all of this information from that screen to be able to use later on. So sneaking back into the database, I was able to star some of those favorites. I'm starting to work my way down the list and decide some of these are a good prospect, a good fit for our grant proposal. And then now I'm going to show you maybe a non-viable prospect, one that maybe isn't the best fit for us. So we mouse over this Endeavor Foundation. We see, okay, their top subject is education. So let's dig a little bit more on this particular grant maker. Right off the bat, you do see that this looks a little bit different. It doesn't have that at a glance picture with the bar graphs and the chart right up at the top. And this is true for a lot of grant makers. They're not all going to look the same. They're not all complete or as up to date. So you might just find that not all the information is the same. But we can start looking down at funding interests, and we see aquariums, crime prevention, disaster relief. These subjects really aren't fitting our grant proposal. Looking over at geographic focus, they're funding projects in Texas, California, Alaska, Washington, Utah. Again, this isn't really looking like a good fit, but I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. I see in their giving limitations that they're giving primarily to these states, and we're not one of them. So our conclusion, kind of looking through this in a minute or two, this might not be the best prospect for our particular funding request, as our focus and interests and location priorities don't align with this particular grant maker. So I can go ahead and say that one's not a great one for us. So we are going to take the information that we found, those good prospects, and we're going to start filling in our grant workbook that I had mentioned earlier. And it's such a great idea to create some kind of manageable system to keep track of your grant prospects. You might have spent 30 or 45 minutes searching through FDO Essentials and kind of starting to pinpoint someone, grant makers that might be interested in your project. Now we got to collect that information so we can do some more research. I've used Excel for this particular sample, but Airtable is another option as well. And basically what we're capturing here is the grant, who's the grant maker, a link to their website so that way we can start to dig in and find more information, grant deadline, the amount that you want to request and maybe your purpose. If you have several people in your organization that are working on grants, who's the point person? Who's the person that is in charge of sending out the application and following up? and then any notes that you might have. So I put in some examples here, one that was not awarded and then one that was awarded. So you can kind of start to see I was filling in those details. But during our 30 to 45-minute FDO Essentials search, after we narrowed it down to those 11, I found 3 that felt like it would be a good fit for Unbound Technology. So I narrowed it down to Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, Idaho Community Foundation, and the Wittenberger Foundation. So I already have those PDFs with information in my email. When I'm able to come back and do more research, I've already been able to find their link so I can do more research at a later date. And I'm going to dedicate more time to do some more research on these grant prospects using information that was initially provided by FDO, but now I'm going to do a little bit more digging. So that's what we're going to focus on now. And for this, we're going to take a look at that Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation as an example. So here's their website. And once I'm at their website, what information am I looking for? I'm looking for, is my organization eligible for this particular grant? When's the application due? We want to make sure we're on time. What information is required for the application? Some applications are going to be quick and easy. They just want a very short description of your project. Some require a recommendation letters. Some require more in-depth materials that go along with the application. How much time is required to complete application? Again, these are not going to be the same. Some might take you an hour. Some might take multiple people several days to put everything together. And the big question, how much can I apply for? Some of these websites are going to be very specific. Here's the amount you can apply for. We're looking for grants to fund between $3,000 and $5,000 or grants up to $30,000. But some websites aren't that specific. And so you need to know, how much do I even request? How much is a reasonable amount? So we want to be able to take a look at that. Once we're on the website, we are able to find some of this information. We're able to see, are we qualified for it? When is the application due? And we're able to also see a grant application planning sheet. And this is really important. If you're able to take a look at what the grant application looks like, you're going to be able to find some information about how long is it going to take to apply for this? What information is required for me to pull together for this grant? But let's take a look at that question. How much can I apply for? Because that's one of the biggest questions that I continue to hear. So we're several days out past our FDO Essential pass. We don't have access to that information anymore. And we also didn't have access to all of the information of the database. So I'm going to bring in another tool called Guidestar. And Guidestar is basically the Yelp for nonprofit organizations. So if you're thinking Yelp does reviews on different restaurants, local restaurants, Guidestar is all the information, all the reviews that you need for nonprofits. So again, we were unable to see which organizations or projects were previously funded by grant makers or how much using FDO Essential. So Guidestar can help fill in those gaps. So you're going to go ahead and create yourself a free account, and then you can search for that the potential grant maker prospect by name or EIN. You can see I just typed in the name here and was able to quickly locate that grant maker prospect. And then when we see their profile here, there's actually quite a lot of information, and a lot of it is similar to what you saw on FDO. Now, what you might think is, well, why wouldn't I just come here first? Well, we didn't know Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation was a potential prospect for our particular request. So we started at FDO Essential to narrow it down to certain organizations that might be willing to fund my request. And now I'm just doing a little bit more research to see more about this organization. So you can use this profile to locate previous 990 forms. These are also oftentimes available on FDO, but I didn't have a lot of time when I was preliminarily searching for these prospects. So I can now take a look at these 990 forms. So you want to take a look at those. You'll also find that Guidestar also tends to have more up-to-date 990 information on their site. They're not just pulling once a year on FDO. So we're going to take a look at this 2019 Form 990 for Laura Moore Cunningham. We're going to take a look at other projects that they have funded and the amounts that they have funded. So you're going to see that this 990 looks very overwhelming and very confusing, and there's a lot of pages. So my big tip to you, just use Control F command or Command F on a Mac to locate the relevant search terms. So for my particular project, we're looking for technology, maybe it's library, makerspace, and then you're going to be able to jump down through the document to find what you're needing. So you can see already we were able to locate some of that information. Here's a bigger view of that. So we were able to find a $10,000 gift to the Glensbury Public Library for library programming and technology upgrades. We were able to see a $2,000 gift for our Morrill Tuttle Public Library for library upgrades. So we're able to kind of see what are like our projects and what's maybe not so similar to our project proposal. So there was a gift of $1,200 to the CUNA Library District for Kinderset Go program. That's not really similar to ours, so we're going to let that one go. But then we can see that there was a $15,000 gift to the Owyhee County Library for a library makerspace. So that's very similar to what we're looking for. So we're going to use this information to get a better idea of similar projects or maybe similar organizations that were funded by the grant maker prospect and how much was funded. So from our information that we were able to pull here, we could see that projects similar to ours by similar organizations were between about $2,000 and $15,000. So now we can head back to our grant workbook and fill in that missing data. We're able to update application deadlines. We were able to find that on the website right away. And then any additional notes. So we were able to say, all right, that 990 snapshot said that we could probably feasibly ask for a $2,000 to $15,000 ask for technology. And then I also like to put in there when the application was submitted. So that way I know that, hey, this one is already done. And what did we ask for? We asked for $10,000 for that really awesome technology ask that Unbound is looking for. We were also able to fill in some of the other information on those other grant maker proposals. So we've got deadlines on those, as well as some guidelines for us about how much we should expect to ask for. Now, for these particular ones, we haven't submitted applications for those, and we haven't necessarily pinpointed what we might ask, but we've already done this research. So a month down the road, when Unbound says, hey, we need to get a new 3D printer, I've already done this work to say, hey, this actually might be a good fit. The Idaho Community Foundation in their guidelines say that we fund projects between $1,000 and $25,000, and it looks like other recipients received about $6,000 to $8,000 for technology projects. This might be a good fit. So if you're able to set aside some time to fill in this grant workbook, it's going to make matching up project proposals and those grant funders a lot easier. Set calendars to remind you of when applications are due. You can see that these two are pretty far out from right now. They're not until August, so we've got some time, but we don't want it to be August 13th before we start to think about these potential grants again. So I'm going to set a reminder for myself at the beginning of July to start thinking about what I might want to submit a request for, and then I might send another reminder towards the end of July to say, hey, did we get this application started and submitted yet? And then the other big tip is to review all application guidelines or requirements. Give yourself plenty of time to complete each application. As I mentioned before, some of these might be really quick applications to fill out, but some of them are going to take a lot longer. So you're going to want to give yourself plenty of time.
Thanks, Erin. Those were such great tips for using the Essentials remote and also just managing your grant applications. That Essentials has been extended to us, that remote access outside of our normal subscription due to library closures due to COVID. So we don't have a date on how long we'll be able to access that Essentials, but we hope that is something that will keep going. And whether or not you're using Essentials or the full professional version of FDO at home, we would also recommend that you take a moment to reflect and take a few notes after those searches. So you can jot down maybe some search terms or ideas for next time, and then what those next steps might be once your search is done, going out to those websites like Erin showed in her example. And then if there was anywhere in the process you got a little stuck, that might be something to think about too as you come back next time. There are through the FDO some help options. So if you're on their website, either in that top menu or even in the bottom menu, Erin, if you can go to the next slide, um, there are some options. They've got some videos, some guides, and then if you'd like help from staff, the Unbound staff is available if you go to mld.org/unbound-appointment. You can fill out a form of what you're looking for, and they can help you with some research that way too. And if you're on Cherry Lane, you can ask a staff member as well. And then if you have any questions for Erin or I about this presentation, about digital services in general, or about the Meridian Library Foundation, you can reach either of us by email, and our addresses are there on the screen, or you can just fill out a help request form on our website. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish you the best of luck on your funding search.